In this video, we're going to finish designing our swimsuit. Now that we have our patterns drafted for the design elements that we wanted to change and we wanted to make in the one piece and the design that you're working on, we have all of our paper. We kept it because in this video we're going to fold out that paper when we do folding for stretch. And we're going to do stretch factorization, which is a process that we use to determine the stretch value of the fabric so that we can take that value and we can fold it out in the pattern, and that's called folding for stretch. The first thing that we want to do is determine the stretch value of our fabric. Your fabric may be different than mine. The way we find our stretch value in our fabric is we're going to do the crosswise stretch first. We put the fabric on the table and we use our stretch gauge. Our stretch gauge is like a ruler on paper, and in the resources I've given you a copy of this stretch gauge, and you can make one yourself, or you can print this one out and you can have it. Technically, it needs to be 15 inches long. So we put our fabric on the table and we fold from the selvage edge up so that we can have a crosswise stretch. And we put a needle into our fabric at the 10 mark, and we put a needle at the 5 mark. We pull our fabric, holding down at the 5 point. We see our ripple, and the pin stops at 8. That means from 10 to 8 is 2 inches. That is a 40% stretch amount in the fabric on the crosswise grain. And we're going to do a lengthwise stretch. We put the fabric on the table and we do a parallel fold, and our fabric is squared at the end. It matches up on the selvage edge, and that gives us a lengthwise stretch. And we put our pin at the 10 mark. We put the pin at the 5 mark. And then we hold down the 5 mark and we pull the fabric out. And you see the ripple, and we're only able to go to 8, which is 2 inches. Okay, so we know that this fabric has a crosswise stretch of 2 inches, and it has a lengthwise stretch of 2 inches. And this class, what I'm showing you is for you to be able to determine what the stretch value is for any fabric, anytime. And you're going to be able to do it off the cuff. Just whenever you pick up a piece of fabric, you're going to find it and you're going to look at it and you're going to hold it up and you're going to pull this out. And you're going to be able to see that this particular fabric over this other fabric here, this is another fabric which has less stretch to it, and you'll be able to feel it instantly. So you go to the selvage edge and you pull that way. This has a much shorter stretch. So we're going to find that value and we're going to compare it to the other fabrics. We're going to put the fabric on the stretch gauge, and we're going to do a perpendicular fold and put the pin at the 10 mark on the gauge and put the pin at the 5 mark on the gauge and pull the fabric out, holding down the pin at the 5 mark, and we pull it out and we start to see the ripple. We go to 6 and it recovers back to 10. So we know that we're going to use that conversion factor. You have 4 inches, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%. That's a lot of stretch. 80%, that is a 4-inch fold. So from 10 to 6, we have 4 inches. That's folding for stretch. We're going to do that next. That fabric is 80% on the crosswise. And now we're going to do a parallel fold to give us a lengthwise stretch. And we're going to put the pin at the 10 mark and put the pin at the 5 mark. And we're going to pull the fabric that way. And you can see the ripple and you can feel the fabric. We have a crosswise stretch that's 80%, and we have a lengthwise stretch that's 80% on this fabric. And we're going to find the stretch value of our next fabric, and I'm going to show you the difference of these two fabrics. And we find our salvage edge. We do a perpendicular fold, and we put our pin at the 10 mark, and we put our pin at the 5 mark, and we pull the fabric, holding down the 5 point. We pull the fabric out. Aha! Now there's our ripple, and we're right at 8.5. We have a crosswise stretch value of 1.5 inches, which is 10, 20, 30% of this fabric. And we do our parallel fold and find our lengthwise stretch. We put the pin at the 10 and at the 5, and we hold down the 5, and we pull the fabric out, and we see our ripple. For this fabric, we have 30% lengthwise stretch. All we have to do now is decide which fabric we're going to use. And there's a reason why we have these stretch amounts. And generally, it's about comfort, it's about function, it's about body type. So if your body needs more of a stretch to it, such as 80%, then you'll want to use our purple. Generally, that is for bigger sizes, things with a lot of area to cover. And the 30% stretch will be for a smaller size. You'll figure that out, and you'll decide which fabric you're going to use. Now that we have determined the stretch value of the fabric that we're going to use for our design, I've decided on the 30% stretch fabric that we determined earlier, and we know that that is 1.5 inches of fold that we're going to have to do on the pattern. All of our patterns that we're going to make in our swimsuits that we make are going to be on the half. So you take from the center front over to your bust. That's your widest point. Maybe, that is. And if it is your hip, from the center front over to the hip, whichever the widest point is. In my case, it's going to be the 30% stretch value equals 1.5 inches, and our total width is 10 7/8 divided by 5. So for every 5 inches, we put a fold in. On my cross width fold, I'm going to fold this 2 times. On my lengthwise fold, I have 30 inches on this form. The fact that I'm using the 30% stretch is there's not a lot of stretch in there anyway. It's for a smaller size because my waist on my dress form is 27.5 and my hip is 38. In other fabrics and other sizes, say if you had 40 inches or 50 inches every 5 inches and you were using 80% stretch, that's 4 inches, you have to calculate, is 8 folds of 4 inches, even with 50 inches, that's still going to shrink that pattern significantly. And there's not a real need for that. So I'm only going to fold my lengthwise stretch 1 time. And you would want to divide them proportionately equal in your pattern. Just because we determined our stretch value to be 30% in our fabric here, we have to remember that all stretch fabrics are not alike. There are so many different combinations. You have spandex, nylon, there's another name for spandex, elastizane. It's been around for a long time, and they don't stretch in and feel as good as some others. You have cotton, you have all these different blends. It's very important. The goal that we have for our swimsuit is to be a nice, snug, and comfortable fit. So we want to keep that in mind. Sometimes you might have to make 1 or 2, you might have to experiment with the different fabrics that you're going to use, because you can't always tell. You just can't. You won't know until you get there. You got to cut it out, put it together, fold out your pattern, and construct it, put it on, and see how it feels. If it doesn't feel right, if it feels too tight, we have to take out the fold by half and then refold it and redo it and then cut out another one. And that's just how it is with stretch fabric. You have to experiment. Your final fit, the one that you like the most, is going to be determined by how much fold is in your pattern. I prefer to take my ruler and start on the center front and measure out just outside the crotch width. In the design, we have 1.25 inches. I'm going to measure out and start my home line, my home fold line, 1.5 inches out from the center front. and continue up into the neck edge, and then draw it out. From there is our home line. Then we measure out our stretch amount line down to the end, and we draw in that line, and we have our first fold line that we're going to fold from inside towards the out. And the next line, we're going to go to the outside arm's eye, and we're going to go just inside the hip and draw in that line and measure over the stretch amount, 1.5 inches on that line, and draw that line, and we're going to fold it over this way. And we fold on this line here all the way down, and then we put that fold amount onto our outside fold line, mash it down all the way down to the crotch. All of our lines that we fold out, we're going to reshape. And therein lies when I asked you earlier in the last video to save your paper, because we're folding these out and then we're going to cut on those lines after we reshape them. So we tape in our areas down to the crotch and through the bust, up into the neck edge, up to the shoulder. And on the second fold of the widthwise, we fold on our line all the way down, and we put our tape through the bust, up to the arm's eye, and there is your cross width fold on your front pattern. And that concludes this part of the folding for stretch. In the next video, we're going to finish folding the crosswise stretch in the back pattern, and we're going to fold for the lengthwise stretch. And then we're going to retrace all of our lines and shape our pattern. We're going to walk it together, and then we're going to cut it out so that we can get ready to construct it. See you in the next video.